Aki Tomoya was cycling to deliver his last newspaper of the day when suddenly he saw a white beret flying in the wind. He quickly pedaled to chase after it, and when he finally caught it, he looked back to see who owned it. There stood a beautiful young woman gazing at him. And with that, his fate in this spring season began. The alarm in Tomoya's room rang, prompting him to get up and prepare to head out, but not before he greeted the anime poster on his wall. He set off to deliver newspapers early in the morning, greeting his neighbor who subscribed to the paper. His neighbor asked if Tomoya was now a paperboy and what had happened to his previous job. Tomoya replied that he was still working at the rental store and the restaurant, he just wanted to add a morning job as well. The neighbor praised Tomoya for being so diligent and asked if it was difficult for him to balance work with school. Tomoya admitted he could manage it, especially since he had a big goal he was working toward. Wasting time wasn't an option, so he bid farewell and went on his way. His neighbor wondered what anime Tomoya was currently obsessed with. This morning marked the first day of the new school year at Toyobasaki Private Academy. Sawamura Spencer Ariri was looking at the announcement board of the class lists. All of her friends greeted her. This year, Ariri was in Class 2G with Kyo Isumaki and Azusa Satomi, and she was glad to be in the same class as them. Suddenly, she noticed a girl arriving, staring at her even as she passed through the school gate. Tomoya was in Class 2B this year, and he was once again in the same class as Kamibu Yoshihiko. Yoshihiko greeted him, but Tomoya asked him not to bother him because he was busy. Yoshihiko guessed that Tomoya must be compiling info on winter anime or reviewing the light novel released last March. However, it turned out Tomoya had already completed that. He had summarized the anime within 24 hours of the final episode airing, reviewed the novel 3 days after its release, and had even completed the game review. Tomoya's mission was to provide helpful news without spoilers, allowing his readers to enjoy it fully. Yoshihiko called Tomoya a unique kind of blogger and asked what he was working on now. Tomoya explained that he had an important mission, a masterpiece project that would be the beginning of an otaku's life. Just then, Yoshihiko froze, staring out the classroom window, and urged Tomoya to look too. Tomoya was annoyed by Yoshihiko's sudden distraction just after he'd answered his question. But Yoshihiko was watching Ariri. She was a half-Japanese, wealthy girl whose father was a British diplomat. What's more, she was the star of the art club, and her artwork had even been accepted for the city art exhibition right after she enrolled here. Tomoya asked why Yoshihiko was so interested in her, and Yoshihiko said Ariri looked even more charming this year. Tomoya asked if Yoshihiko still liked three-dimensional girls, especially when Tomoya himself had already committed to two-dimensional girls. But Yoshihiko pointed out that Ariri was every bit a moe heroine with her pale skin, blonde twin tails, and me socks, the ideal dream girl from any two-dimensional game. Tomoya replied that three-dimensional girls were just too much trouble. Yoshihiko suggested they go to the opening ceremony together, but Tomoya told him to go ahead. He'd catch up later. Ariri went to her locker and opened it to get her comic, only to hear Tomoya call her careless, saying she usually did miss limited editions. Tomoya informed her that online stores had long since stopped taking orders and that he had pre-ordered from every store that offered exclusive products. Ariri reminded Tomoya not to talk to her at school. Tomoya responded by asking if that was any way to treat the guy who had carried 5 boxes, each weighing 1.8 kilograms, around Akihabara on release day for her. Ariri replied that she'd already given him a bonus poster and said it should be Tomoya thanking her. Then she asked why he was in Class G when he was actually a Class B student. Tomoya was surprised she knew his class placement, considering it had just been announced today. Embarrassed, Ariri said she'd leave if Tomoya didn't have any other business with her. Tomoya called out to her, saying he wanted to talk about something important. However, the opening ceremony was about to start, so Ariri reminded him of that. Tomoya insisted it would be better to say it now, practically begging her to listen. He started telling her about his project plan. Curious, Ariri asked why someone like Tomoya would have such a ridiculous and painful idea. Tomoya was thrilled. She asked and explained that a week ago, he'd experienced a life-changing moment. He described feeling something in his hands that he could only call destiny or maybe even a miracle. He said it felt like a scene from a shoujo manga, a romantic anime, a moe light novel, or the prologue of a dating sim. However, Ariri replied that she had seen that kind of thing a million times and was already tired of it. Tomoya explained that this formula for success worked well and was popular, so he wanted to pour his feelings into it. Ariri asked if Tomoya wanted to make a game that told the story of his encounter with this girl. Tomoya said that when he saw the girl, he could already envision the text and music, almost like it was playing in his head. That was when he realized the only way to tell the story was through a game. Ariri questioned why Tomoya hadn't just chased after the girl and confessed his love. Tomoya countered by asking why he bothered confessing to a three-dimensional girl. Frustrated, Ariri asked if he really wanted to drag her into his little fantasy world. Tomoya pointed out that Ariri was the best illustrator he knew. By day, she was the pride of Toyogasaki Academy's art club, but by night, her secret otaku identity was as the popular 18-plus doujinshi artist known as Egoistic Lily or Kashiwaji Eri. Annoyed, Ariri reminded Tomoya not to use that name at school. Tomoya asked if she considered working on the project, but Ariri declined. Then Tomoya reminded her of the promise they made in grade school. Back then, Tomoya had told her that one day he would be the director of a game company, and when that day came, he would hire her. Ariri had said she would wait for him no matter how long it took and become an artist for his game company. With a toss of her hair, Ariri brushed it off, saying no grade school kid makes a future promise with that much detail. Ariri told Tomoya that if he was really serious about his project, he should be creating the illustrations and script himself, since that's what true doujin artists do. Tomoya said there's no way he could do that, as he'd never be able to capture the girl's beauty, not in a million years. Intrigued, Ariri asked just how beautiful this girl really was, but Tomoya replied that the scene was still etched into his memory. He described her in a white dress and beret, standing on a hill, surrounded by cherry blossom petals blowing in the wind. Ariri pointed out that Tomoya's words didn't give any details about her face. She was sure he couldn't even remember what the girl looked like. Tomoya replied that his feelings weren't about capturing some perfect image. He said he didn't want to lessen her beauty with his attempts. He needed Ariri's illustration skills for that. Frustrated, Ariri tore up Tomoya's project proposal, saying that his thinking was shallow. Tomoya was stunned that a doujinshi artist would say something like that. Ariri argued that if this was supposed to be his grand project and he'd forgotten such a key element, then it was obvious he wasn't serious about it. She called him a fake producer, just looking to take advantage and enjoy the results without real dedication. Tomoya insisted he wasn't half-hearted, he was passionate, filled with ideas, and driven to bring this project to life. Ariri, unimpressed, questioned whether all his ideas fit on a single piece of paper. She suggested it was probably just a simple plot about a boy meeting a mysterious girl, getting close to her, kissing, and then ending it. She scoffed that his so-called unique vision could be summed up in a single sentence. Ariri walked away, ignoring Tomoya's pleas to hear him out. He told her he'd be waiting in the AV lab after school, but Ariri replied it was far too late for him to convince her now. During the opening ceremony, Yoshihiko noticed how dejected Tomoya looked and asked if he'd been rejected by a girl on the first day of school. Tomoya denied it, saying he was just dealing with a major crisis between him and his fresh start as an otaku. But, as usual, Yoshihiko wasn't really listening. Instead, he pointed out a girl named Kosumigoka Utaha. She was the smartest student in the school, ranking number 1 in her class for 2 years straight. Rumor had it that she lived in her own world, always slept in class, and never did her homework. Yet no teacher dared to scold her. Tomoya called Yoshihiko out for acting like he knew Utaha when he'd never actually met her. Utaha was indeed gorgeous and widely considered one of the 2 most beautiful girls at Toyogasaki Academy. Some people even said she was the dark side to Ariri's light side. Tomoya warned Yoshihiko that comparing Ariri and Utaha like that could come back to bite him. Still, Yoshihiko pressed on, saying Utaha had long black hair, a great figure, and wore black stockings. She was practically the perfect moe heroine to rival Ariri. But Tomoya insisted Yoshihiko stop judging them purely based on their appearances. Yoshihiko conceded it was odd that neither girl was ever seen hanging out with guys despite all the admiration they got. He figured they either knew how to hide it well, or maybe they actually dislike men. Tomoya told Yoshihiko not to ask him about it, but Yoshihiko laughed it off, saying he should have known better than to discuss it with Tomoya, the guy who only liked two-dimensional girls. After school, Tomoya met with Utaha, bringing her lunch since he knew she probably hadn't eaten yet. He asked if he could sit beside her, but Utaha just stayed silent and nudged him with her foot as a sign to open her lunchbox. She started eating with enthusiasm and then began asking questions, though her voice was barely audible. Tomoya handed her a drink. When she finished eating, Utaha said it must be because he wanted a favor that Tomoya was willing to show up in front of the woman he long discarded. Tomoya asked her not to say things that could give people the wrong idea and asked for her thoughts on his project plan. He admitted he'd never written a script before and would really appreciate her feedback. He then asked for an even bigger favor, saying he'd be thrilled if Utaha would join the whole project. Utaha's reaction, however, took him by surprise. She immediately crumpled the project proposal paper, saying, "Trash is trash, filth is filth, and ashes remain ashes." Tomoya was shocked, especially since he'd written the proposal with all his heart. Utaha told him that his misguided passion, his blatant naivety, and even his perseverance didn't match up to the appeal of his own name. She wasn't willing to give feedback on something she found unworthy. Tomoya asked if his project was really that terrible. Utaha gave a score of 0, saying parts of it were muddled, predictable from the story and source material alone. The worst part, she added, was that the content wasn't even on par with a pirated copy. She told him that what she'd read so far had left her completely disappointed. Tomoya couldn't believe Utaha thought so poorly of his project. She also said she was too busy to indulge in Tomoya's fleeting desire to start a game production studio. Tomoya insisted it wasn't just a whim. He'd always wanted to make games. He wanted to match, even in some small way, the game creators he admired. He reminded her that Utaha had once suggested that he might or might not have what it took to be a game creator. Utaha didn't remember ever saying that and accused him of trying to change the subject with some underhanded flattery. Tomoya was frustrated with her, especially knowing Utaha was the top student at Toyabasaki Academy and actually the famous high school novelist Kasumi Utako, the author of Koizuru Metronome, which had sold over 500,000 copies. Utaha said that since Tomoya knew who she really was, he should know she was very busy. Tomoya mentioned he knew she recently started a new series and congratulated her on it. She thanked him and started to walk away. Tomoya kept pleading, asking Utaha to meet him in the AV lab after school. Utaha, however, couldn't help but regret that he was only asking for her help now. Tomoya continued working on his project proposal, then headed out to meet Ariuri and Utaha. Suddenly, Kato Megumi called out to him, saying that Ms. Asumi asked him to come to the teacher's room to help carry teaching materials to the AV lab. However, Tomoya replied that he couldn't go right now because he had something important to do and that he would take care of it early tomorrow. Megumi then thanked him for retrieving her white beret that had fallen during spring break. Tomoya didn't remember this immediately, since it had been a few days, but then he realized who she was. Meanwhile, Ariuri was waiting in the AV lab. Hearing a noise inside the room, she said that she came not because she agreed with Tomoya's request, but simply because she'd lose sleep if she didn't settle things. Utaha responded by praising her sense of duty, surprising Ariuri, who didn't realize Utaha was there. Shocked, Ariuri yelled, ran up to her, and asked why she was here. Utaha shot back with the same question, asking why Ariuri was there. Ariuri guessed that Tomoya must have asked Utaha to come as well. Utaha admitted that she felt something was off when Tomoya mentioned wanting to make a game, but she hadn't expected him to ask Ariuri to do the character designs. Not wanting to be outdone, Ariuri shot back that Tomoya had asked a gloomy girl like Utaha to write the script. Utaha smirked, sarcastically wondering if it was wise to trust the illustrations to a delinquent who acted like a perfect young lady on the outside but was rotten on the inside. This infuriated Ariuri, who insisted she wasn't a delinquent, while Utaha admitted she might be gloomy, but at least she was more honest with herself than Ariuri. Ariuri warned Utaha to stay away from Tomoya, accusing her of just latching onto him because he reached out. Utaha countered, saying Ariuri had no right to talk since she was doing the same thing. Angered, Ariuri stated that she'd actually come to stop Tomoya because she didn't believe his crazy project would succeed. Utaha casually remarked that if Ariuri felt that way, maybe she shouldn't have come in the first place. Deciding to leave, Ariuri asked if Utaha was planning to stay and entertain Tomoya's wild fantasies. Tomoya interrupted, saying it wasn't Ariuri's concern. Realizing Megumi was the girl he met in the spring, Tomoya went back to her to confirm. Megumi clarified that they were in the same class. Tomoya, still confused, asked if her name was Kanu Megumi, but she corrected him, saying her full name was Katu Megumi. One day in the spring, Tomoya met his destiny. He had long remembered his dream, which was to create a dating sim game that could make people laugh, feel touched, and create a main heroine who could make people's hearts ache. At first, the response from those close to him was cold, but he didn't give up on expressing his dream, and eventually his friends came back to him one by one. He also had a dramatic encounter with that girl, and he started taking the first steps toward realizing his big dream. Ariuri slapped him to snap Tomoya out of his self-deception in the middle of a recap of episode 1. Utaha just watched their debate while working on the project. Tomoya invited Megumi to meet him at a cafe. He told her that he hadn't realized how sweet she was before. Megumi thanked him and said that what Tomoya hadn't realized wasn't her sweetness, but that he had actually never noticed her presence. It turned out that Megumi had been in the same class with him since the first year of high school. She had always been the girl who was close by. The waiter came over to their table and Megumi began to order food. Tomoya observed how sweet Megumi was with a classic charm. She wasn't too tall or too short, her skin was smooth, and her figure was slender with curves in all the right places. It was clear she was a sweet girl, and Tomoya felt a sense of fate connecting him to her. Megumi thanked Tomoya for treating her, but Tomoya apologized for suddenly inviting her to meet. It was a coincidence that Megumi had no plans that day, so she was able to accept his invitation. Tomoya asked about her hat, and Megumi explained that she had given it to her cousin since he had stopped by and liked it, so she gave it to him as a gift. Tomoya realized that this meeting wasn't just about family obligations. Megumi then asked why Tomoya had asked her that, and Tomoya just thought it was a coincidence. However, Megumi said that if Tomoya noticed her, just like how he noticed him, then it wasn't a coincidence. Tomoya complimented Megumi's good memory, saying she could remember such an insignificant otaku. Megumi told him that even though Tomoya was an otaku, he shouldn't consider himself unimportant. Tomoya believed he had no appeal at all. Megumi then pointed out that Tomoya was one of the 3 popular kids at school. He was known for donating light novels to the library, organizing anime screenings during the school festival, and no one at school didn't know Aki Tomoya. Tomoya still didn't believe it because the otaku population had sharply increased, and they were still looked down upon by society. Megumi then said she was the opposite of Tomoya, that she was truly boring. Her grades weren't that great, she wasn't in any clubs, and she had never served in any class leadership positions. Megumi also admitted that she didn't have many friends, but she wasn't interested in making new ones. That's why she wasn't surprised that Tomoya didn't remember her. Tomoya said that was wrong. Megumi wasn't boring, and he asked her not to think of herself that way. He also told her to stop feeling discouraged because of misunderstandings. Tomoya could guarantee that Megumi wasn't boring, it was just that her character was more neutral, not very flashy. In other words, Megumi wasn't perfect yet, which was why she didn't stand out. Tomoya said all of this loudly, drawing the attention of the other cafe patrons. Megumi asked to interrupt his words, asking if that wasn't worse than boring. Tomoya asked her not to underestimate the boring character type because not many characters develop in a way that stays true to themselves. For example, a character with twin braids, glasses, and freckles. If Megumi combined those boring traits, she would become more charming and grab people's attention because that character would be very clear. Tomoya then asked if Megumi had any unique traits that would make her unforgettable when someone looked at her, and the answer was obviously no. Tomoya emphasized once again that Megumi was sweet from the beginning and her character didn't match up at all, and there was something that needed to be done about her personality flaws. Megumi interrupted again, asking if her personality flaws were a problem for Tomoya. Tomoya replied that it was clearly his concern because Megumi needed to be someone special and her personality needed to be clear. Megumi asked what all of that was for, and Tomoya finally said that Megumi was the girl who should be the heroine of his game. Megumi asked again if that was Tomoya's way of confessing his love to her. Tomoya was confused. Megumi did know that Tomoya was talking to her, but it felt like his gaze was looking at something far away. Tomoya thought it wasn't that he was looking far, but more like from a different dimension. He begged Megumi to help him regain his passion for creating again. Megumi was still confused by what Tomoya was talking about, and he pleaded with her to help him bring back his dream. Megumi then asked if Tomoya was dating the 2 most beautiful girls in school. Tomoya responded that there were 3 mistakes in what she just said. First, the most beautiful girls in school only existed in dating sim game and didn't exist in real life. Second, dating 2 beautiful girls at school was not true. And third, the biggest mistake was that a 2D otaku like him could have a 3D girlfriend. Megumi asked then who the girl outside the window was to Tomoya. It turned out that Eriri and Utaha were watching him from outside the cafe window. They then joined Tomoya and Megumi at their table. Megumi asked why Eriri and Utaha were here. Tomoya said that if Megumi recognized them, things wouldn't be so complicated. Megumi recognized both of them as the 2 most beautiful girls at Toyogasaki Academy. Tomoya asked Megumi to stop mixing up dating sim game with reality. But Megumi said that now she was with 3 famous people from Toyogasaki Academy. She felt like just a speck of dust among them. Tomoya told her that although Eriri and Utaha might seem intimidating, they weren't that bad. Even though they had foul mouths and bad personalities, they were otaku on a much higher level than him. Tomoya introduced Eriri and Utaha as members of his game circle. Eriri was the illustrator and Utaha was the scriptwriter. Megumi still didn't understand any of this. Utaha then said that she didn't understand it either and immediately stepped on Tomoya's foot, saying that this was how a guy who had made plans with a girl ended up hanging out with another girl instead. Tomoya introduced Megumi as the newest member of the circle and the main heroine of the game they were going to create. Megumi said that she had just learned about all of this and Tomoya assigned her a role in the project. Eriri stared at Megumi, making Megumi ask Tomoya why Eriri was staring at her. Tomoya told her not to worry about it because that's just how Eriri looked at people. Eriri then realized that the girl Tomoya had been talking about all this time was Megumi. She didn't even care if Megumi was his girlfriend, a fellow otaku, or just a friend looking for some benefits. Megumi was shocked by Eriri's sharp attitude. Tomoya explained that this was Eriri's true nature, and she was just pretending to be innocent at school. Eriri kicked Tomoya and told him not to talk like he knew her so well. Tomoya asked her not to start a fight with someone she had known for years. They continued arguing, which made Utaha tell Eriri to stop embarrassing herself, but Eriri ignored her. Utaha reminded them that it could become a problem if a Toyogasaki student was seen here and referred to Eriri as mispretending to be innocent. Eriri, annoyed, turned and kicked Utaha's leg, causing their fight to attract the attention of the cafe's other customers. Tomoya tried to calm them down, but once again, Aririri and Utaha criticized the project. Aririri said the project didn't yet convey what feelings the players were supposed to express. Utaha even suspected that Tomoya still couldn't picture what he actually wanted to create. Tomoya responded saying that Aririri and Utaha were speaking as though they were the creators. They both simultaneously declared that they were creators. Tomoya was sure they both actually got along well. Aririri said that if things kept going like this, Tomoya's dream of making the game would just stay a dream. Utaha then gave Tomoya an ultimatum. He could either start writing again or give up. Aririri suggested that Tomoya should just give up, and Utaha saw that Tomoya was almost heartbroken over the gap between his dreams and reality. According to Aririri, the concept of a fated meeting wasn't as sweet as a light novel. Utaha didn't argue with her. She said if meetings were based on fate or coincidence, the world would just be full of childhood friends ending up together. Aririri asked if there was something wrong with that, saying she didn't mean it that way. Tomoya said he had already made his decision. Aririri and Utaha asked together who Tomoya had chosen. Tomoya replied that he chose not to give up. He would rewrite as many times as needed until Aririri and Utaha approved. They thought Tomoya was going to choose one of them, but it turned out he was talking about the project. Tomoya was confident he would create the greatest dating sim game that would touch everyone's hearts. He would also turn Megumi into the main heroine who would make everyone's heart flutter. But when they looked around, Megumi was no longer sitting in her seat. They started searching for her and found out that Megumi had stood up to get a drink. None of them had noticed that she had left. The next day, Tomoya invited Megumi to meet up. Megumi came to Tomoya. Thankfully, the weather was nice today. She mentioned that the weather forecast had been doubtful, so she'd been worried earlier. She asked if Tomoya's house was nearby, saying that she occasionally passed by this street. Tomoya asked if Megumi remembered this place. Megumi said the locals called it Detective Hill because there was a detective agency nearby. However, that wasn't what Tomoya meant, so he asked why she thought he chose this place to meet. Megumi assumed it was because the place was close to his house, but Tomoya said that wasn't the reason. Megumi asked if it was because it was far away, which made Tomoya annoyed, and he explained that this was the first place they met. Megumi then said the place they met was during the entrance ceremony a year ago. Tomoya asked if she understood the purpose of today, and Megumi said that Tomoya probably wanted to talk about something, which is why he invited her to his house. Tomoya explained that this was the problem. What kind of girl would go to the house of a guy she just met? He also told Megumi not to dress like a normal person because no one had ever come to his house looking that normal. Megumi also sensed something was off. She suddenly realized that Tomoya would never invite a real-world girl to his house. Tomoya then asked why she still came if she knew he was strange and why she came so easily if he was an otaku. Megumi didn't expect to be lectured like this by the guy who had invited her. Tomoya said that up until now, Megumi had been living an aimless life, and today he was going to teach her how to live in the real world. Megumi started to suspect that maybe Tomoya's room had been designed so no one could hear her screams for help. Tomoya told Megumi to prepare herself because he was going to fill her head with moe content. They entered Tomoya's house and Megumi was amazed by the sight of his room, which truly reflected the life of an otaku. Tomoya blamed Megumi for acting so casually and said that she should have immediately commented on how hot it was and opened the window or pretended to sit on the bed and act awkwardly. She should have acted like that. Megumi asked why Tomoya expected her to ruin the mood by being tense like that. Tomoya was confident he could get the right reaction from Megumi soon. Today was a training session to enhance Megumi's 2D heroine sensitivity. Tomoya then offered Megumi all the dating sim game visual novels he had, telling her they were all famous ones that could make her laugh, cry, or even faint. Megumi chose the shortest one. Tomoya selected a dating sim game titled Dear Memories, a legendary game that had sold over 300,000 copies and was adapted into an anime. The game began, and Megumi chose the option to give the character a gift instead of inviting them home or suggesting a night view. Tomoya said that her choice was wrong, but Megumi argued that giving a gift was a natural choice to make their date memorable. Tomoya considered Megumi to be insensitive. He told her that the point of the game wasn't about giving a keepsake, but about creating memories together. Megumi said that what mattered most was the memory they shared, not the gift itself. Tomoya agreed, mentioning that giving a gift could lead to awkwardness after a breakup. He then told Megumi to take a break while he explained something. He began teaching her about the heroine of a dating sim game, something Megumi didn't know much about. He explained that heroines in dating sim game were representations, not robots that always give the same answers when a player clicks on certain points. They were warm-blooded humans, more captivating than real girls. That's how Megumi should be. Megumi responded saying that this meant the heroines could change or even break up with the player. Tomoya couldn't even imagine a 2D girl breaking up with him. He couldn't live without her. They finished the game and Tomoya was crying after hearing a particular scene. He asked Megumi if she didn't think that scene was incredibly sad. Megumi said that she should have been moved. Tomoya believed that Megumi finally understood that the dialogue and the inserted songs were truly amazing. But this wasn't the real climax yet. After this, something even more amazing would happen, so she should get ready to be in awe, because to save the main character, the female character was willing to make a sacrifice. Megumi said it was very interesting and that maybe she could enjoy playing it peacefully if no one had spoiled the plot for her. She would have definitely cried. The game ended and Megumi didn't expect the plot to end so unexpectedly. Tomoya was also surprised because Megumi turned out to be someone who enjoyed going on adventures. Tomoya asked her what she thought after finishing the game. Megumi felt mixed emotions but found it enjoyable in the end. The graphics were sweet, the voice actors were dramatic, the music was good, and the story was interesting. She also learned about dating sim game and anime like this, but that didn't mean she didn't know anything. Tomoya was happy. There was no doubt that Megumi was the right girl for him. Tomoya said that this was the kind of heroine he wanted to instill in Megumi. Megumi responded, asking if that meant she was suddenly going to die like in the game. Tomoya asked her not to compare the game to the type of scumbags who kill off heroines just for an emotional response. But it seemed like Megumi didn't quite understand. Tomoya explained using a metaphor, no great weapon is made carelessly and critiques shouldn't make someone lose their way. Instead, they should look at the bigger picture with clear eyes. He also suggested considering the most captivating interpretation for the players. Suddenly, Tomoya remembered the criticisms from Eriri and Utaha. He realized that he himself was the one who didn't understand. Tomoya thanked Megumi because, thanks to her, he had learned the most important lesson of all. After that, Megumi said her goodbyes to head home. But Tomoya told her that there was a sequel to the game. And this was the beginning of the story, the birth and rise of it. He wouldn't spoil the plot and quickly set up the game again. However, Megumi said it was probably already midnight and the game wouldn't be finished by then. Tomoya replied that his parents were out of town for a picnic, and since it was Saturday and the next day was a school holiday, he insisted Megumi stay over. He begged her to stay and help him become a true man. Megumi was, of course, shocked. She said she called her parents to let them know she'd be home late. Tomoya asked if Megumi was sure because in this situation, he wouldn't dare take responsibility if anything happened. Megumi replied, asking if they were going to stay up all night playing the game. Tomoya called Megumi, telling her that Eriri and Utaha hadn't agreed to his project yet. He realized that becoming a creator was much harder than he thought. Megumi asked when the next deadline was, and Tomoya said it was the end of Golden Week. That would be his last chance. The long holiday started today, but even so, time was of the essence. Tomoya needed to focus on the game from this point onward. Megumi mentioned that there would be a proficiency test in the first week, but Tomoya asked her to forget about it for now. They needed to discuss the project. They had to get Eriri and Utaha involved and create the best dating sim game ever. Unfortunately, Megumi couldn't come because she was on vacation in Hokkaido with her family until the end of Golden Week. Tomoya motivated himself to start the project right away while he still had 4 days left before the deadline. He banned himself from watching anime, playing games, or reading light novels. He even put tape over his anime shelf to prevent himself from being tempted. However, he couldn't resist. He initially planned to read just one book to give himself a boost, but ended up reading several books and fell asleep. His attempt to stay focused had backfired. He decided to step out for a drink. Suddenly, he heard a voice asking for cola. He went to the fridge and grabbed 2 drinks, only to realize someone was in his room. He quickly went back to his room with the drinks, shocked to see Eriri there. Eriri told him to put the drinks down in a safe spot because she was afraid of spilling them on her sketch. Tomoya felt his schedule was ruined because Eriri had just barged into his room. Eriri had rung the bell earlier but got no response. It had been a few years since Eriri last visited, as they hadn't spoken to each other in years. Tomoya asked why she had come, and it turned out she wanted to work on her drawing for an event this weekend. Tomoya yelled, warning her not to visit a guy's house to work on inappropriate drawings. But what could she do? She had a deadline this month and couldn't draw at home because her father was hosting a garden party with many guests. Eriri couldn't just lock herself in her room, especially since even the foreign minister was at the party. Tomoya asked if her appearance at home was meant to seem disconnected from the girl he knew. They both went back to their work. Eriri then asked about the progress on Tomoya's project. Tomoya said he still had 3 days left and plenty of time to work on it. Eriri concluded that there hadn't been any progress, because when a creator starts using the number of days left as an excuse, it's clear they're behind schedule. This hit Tomoya hard and made him feel even more down. Eriri told him to just give up, saying that creating a game was too difficult for him. Tomoya replied that they still didn't know the outcome, especially since they had made many things together in the past that turned out bad. They used to make ugly drawings, bad stories, and happily share them with each other. But Eriri said she didn't remember them ever doing that. Now she was part of a famous circle, and whatever Eriri could do, Tomoya could do as well. Tomoya would do what he loved, and one day he would become a creator more popular than Iriri. Iriri said that if Tomoya could do that, he wouldn't need to worry about her. Hearing that, Tomoya thought that Iriri had come here to cheer him up. Iriri yelled in frustration and told Tomoya not to think weird things about her. Tomoya called Iriri an ultimate tsundere, but Iriri replied that she wasn't being tsundere anymore, she just didn't care about him at all. Suddenly, the doorbell rang and Iriri got upset because someone had arrived just when she and Tomoya were talking about something important. Iriri immediately jumped onto the bed to look out the window, and she was shocked to see who had come to Tomoya's house. It was Utaha. She mentioned that Tomoya's room was tittier than she had imagined, even though it was clearly the room of an otaku. Tomoya quickly cleaned up the drinking glass and Iriri's pencil, and he asked Utaha why she had come over since it was the first time she had visited his house. Even though it was Utaha's first time coming here, she didn't feel nervous at all. In fact, she had been looking forward to spending time alone with Tomoya today. Utaha cornered Tomoya against the wall and said that he couldn't run away from her anymore. Tomoya's house was indeed known for treating guests like royalty, but Utaha's touch made him nervous, and he yelled that he would make sure she got home safely. Utaha was actually just joking. She had brought cake and said she only came to visit the frontline soldier and ask how the battle was going. Tomoya said that he hadn't even started yet. Utaha had been hoping for more than that. Tomoya admitted that he had learned from his past failures and that approach wouldn't work on people who worked in the same field. Utaha grabbed Tomoya's hand and told him not to push himself too hard with this. If he gave up now, his old life as a livestock pig would be waiting for him, and she was sure that kind of life would be tough for Tomoya. Tomoya said that hearing himself being directly called a livestock pig made his feelings a little mixed. Utaha said that the life of a creator may seem glamorous, but it wasn't as beautiful as it looked. Deadlines could make people go crazy, the competition was tough, and no one knew when their talent would disappear. Tomoya didn't want to hear excuses from a newcomer whose name was just rising. Utaha also mentioned that the worst part was dealing with the haters. When getting good reviews, they'd mock it as a marketing tactic. If the book sales were bad, they'd laugh about it, and when offering reasons, they'd refuse to take any responsibility. Utaha got emotional just thinking about the haters. If she could, she wanted to gather them all up and deal with them all at once. Tomoya tried to calm Utaha down. She said that's why Tomoya should keep subscribing to her books as usual. Tomoya remembered Utaha's words that she still couldn't imagine the game he was going to create. Those words really touched his heart and made him realize that he still didn't know much. That's when he figured out what he wanted to make and whether he could find a solution to get Utaha to agree to it. Tomoya begged Utaha to give him some time because he would work hard to make a project proposal that she would approve of. Utaha couldn't stop him because he was so determined, so she told him to do whatever he wanted. However, as a trade-off, she wouldn't extend the deadline. She would wait for him until the end of the vacation. Tomoya promised to keep fighting to create the project until Utaha would beg him to join in. One last piece of advice from Utaha was that if Tomoya was serious about creating a circle and making a game together, he should include all the members in it. Otherwise, the quality of the product wouldn't be good no matter how hard he tried, and Tomoya wouldn't be able to stay motivated. So for now, all the members should do their best. Utaha also mentioned that Tomoya should have hidden Iriri's bike. Tomoya just realized that Iriri's bike was in his yard. Iriri came out from the closet and yelled in frustration, calling Utaha's name. Tomoya told her that if she wanted to curse him, she shouldn't hide it. Iriri responded saying there was no way she could come out while Utaha was in the room. However, Utaha seemed to know everything, even without Iriri appearing. Iriri immediately decided to go home. Tomoya called Megumi and asked how she was feeling, if she was happy. Megumi asked about the deadline for the project, but Tomoya told her not to worry about it and just enjoy her vacation. He was confident he could handle it. Before ending the call, Megumi asked what exactly made Tomoya interested in her, whether it was the times they spent together or something about her that he liked or didn't like. Tomoya responded by asking if Megumi was seriously ill and didn't want to continue living. Megumi's question wasn't as serious as Tomoya thought. He started thinking about all the moments with Megumi, which actually felt enjoyable, and he realized there was one thing he might want to change. He hoped Megumi could grow more. Megumi then asked if Tomoya wanted her to become a harsher person. Tomoya clarified that he didn't mean that. Iriri and Utaha were the harsh ones in his life. Megumi then wondered why Iriri and Utaha were so different, and said she would think about it herself before hanging up the phone. Tomoya began thinking about creating a proposal, but once again, he ended up reading a book, browsing a light novel blog, and eventually falling asleep. Once again, he had wasted time. That night, he realized an entire day had passed without him accomplishing anything. He quickly started packing up all his anime books, tapes, and games from his shelf. He still had 2 days left, but it felt like today had been wasted as well. His mind started to feel like it had hit a dead end. He felt like he had no talent at all. He then went to the place where he had met Megumi, only to find that it was just an ordinary hill. He had come here hoping for some inspiration or an idea to come to him, but even now, he couldn't see anything. No cherry blossoms in the air, no heroine in a one-piece dress standing at the top of the hill. Tomoya started wondering if maybe his dream was coming to an end. His dream had started here, but could it really end here? Suddenly, Megumi threw her hat in front of Tomoya, and cherry blossoms started blowing through the air. She said it had been a long time since they last met. Tomoya called out Megumi's name, and Megumi remarked that it was unlike him to recognize her. Megumi walked toward him and picked up her hat. Tomoya asked what she was actually doing. Megumi put the hat on and called Tomoya by his real name. She then asked if the kind of meeting Tomoya was hoping for was something like this, whether in an anime, a game, or a light novel. She also asked if this was how the girl Tomoya's dreams would talk, behave, and fall in love. She questioned whether she passed the test, asking if she could be the heroine of the story Tomoya was trying to create and if she could help him. Tomoya felt nervous and asked if Megumi wasn't supposed to be in Hokkaido right now. She replied that she had come back early, actually 3 days ago. She didn't expect the deadline to fall on the last day of the long holiday, so she decided not to go. Tomoya was surprised that Megumi would miss her family vacation for something so trivial. Megumi explained that if she didn't help him, Tomoya would keep nagging her. Tomoya felt bad and suggested that Megumi could have stopped by after her trip. But Megumi thought she wouldn't be of much use at a meeting. She had returned because she wanted to join the circle's activities to stay motivated. It wasn't just her. Ariuri and Utaha had been a big help too. Ariuri had even redesigned a dress, making it as close to Tomoya's taste as possible, with a more mini, shy, and 2D concept. It turned out that it wasn't just Tomoya's taste, but the dream of every moe otaku. The way she spoke and acted was directly taken from Ugaha's script. Acting really needed to be precise. Tomoya praised Megumi for being able to withstand the training, even though Utaha had once written scripts for the drama club and had expelled 3 club members. But according to Megumi, she still found it fun to be trained by Utaha. Maybe she could even get along with Ariuri and Utaha, as well as the rest of the circle. Tomoya didn't expect Megumi to be willing to do this, and he also believed in her dream, which might not be real or might just be a coincidence. Honestly, Megumi didn't fully understand what Tomoya wanted to do, but she believed he was truly serious about pursuing his dream. Megumi encouraged Tomoya to make her the happy heroine who would make everyone envious. Tomoya promised to make Megumi a heroine who would make everyone's heart race. Megumi blushed when Tomoya said that. Tomoya then said they should also make sure to get Ariuri and Utaha involved to create the greatest dating sim game. Tomoya took Megumi's hand and led her with him. The meeting had to be held right away since the deadline was the next day. Megumi asked if the project hadn't made any progress yet, but Tomoya told her she was free to suggest ideas, like whispering them to him in moe style like before. Megumi mentioned that she had school tomorrow, but Tomoya reassured her, saying that he'd let her leave at 7 a.m. Megumi then bargained, saying she could leave at 6 a.m. and Tomoya agreed. It turned out that Ariuri and Utaha had been watching them the whole time. Utaha remarked that it seemed like she and Ariuri had gotten dragged into this issue. Ariuri said that her project proposal wasn't finished yet and she wasn't sure if it would be done by tomorrow. Utaha joked that it seemed like the sudden main heroine had appeared and the battle was over. Ariuri looked upset seeing Tomoya and Megumi walking together, which made Utaha ask if seeing that bothered Ariuri why she was helping Megumi at all. Ariuri said that she didn't care at all and could even say it had nothing to do with her. Utaha warned Ariuri that if she didn't handle her stubbornness soon, she might regret it one day. Ariuri stubbornly replied that she didn't believe she could ever work with someone like Utaha. Utaha responded that she was really looking forward to working with Ariuri. Ariuri remained stubborn, saying she didn't want to work with a writer like Utaha. Suddenly, Megumi turned around and waved at them, but Ariuri just stuck her tongue out at her. Today, Utaha's manager Machida Sonoko called her to let her know there was an interview scheduled for tomorrow. Utaha agreed to do the interview, saying she had made progress on the storyline for her new book. Sonoko, however, questioned whether Utaha's words could be trusted. Utaha then asked if she had ever lied to her. Sonoko admitted that while Utaha had never lied about her books, when it came to deadlines, Utaha lied nearly every time. Utaha used this as a reason to withdraw her earlier statement about being available for the interview tomorrow. She said she wouldn't be able to make it. Sonoko pleaded with Utaha, explaining that the exclusive interview about Kasumi Utaku's Utaha's pen name latest book would be featured in several pages of the upcoming issue of a magazine, and it had already been announced in the previous issue. However, Utaha remained firm, saying she worked on paper, not in front of others. Sonoko understood, even though she had already made arrangements and thought Utaha would be pleased. Then Sonoko said something that shocked Utaha so much that she accidentally bumped her foot into a chair. Meanwhile, Megumi was riding the train with Tomoya. She mentioned that she had finished reading a light novel called Koisaru Metronome. Tomoya was surprised and asked her what she thought about it. Megumi said that because of the novel, she had been sleeping less, she couldn't relax until she finished reading it. At first, Megumi thought light novels were only for guys, but this one made a woman cry. Tomoya felt proud of her, and Megumi asked if she could keep all the light novels. Tomoya said she could, since he had given them to her for free. He even still had 2 more sets, one for him to read and one for his collection. Megumi was really happy, and Tomoya promised to buy her more when she ran out of books. Although Megumi wasn't used to the life of an otaku, she couldn't believe that Utaha was the one who wrote this book. Tomoya confirmed that it was true. When people think of a high school girl being a light novel author, they usually picture something typical of the genre. But when they see Utaha at school, no one would guess she was a romance novel author. This meant Utaha really kept her character in check, and Tomoya told Megumi that she should learn a lot from Utaha. Megumi, however, said that it was impossible for an ordinary person to be the smartest student and a successful novel author at the same time. Tomoya was confident that it wasn't just God-given talent, but Utaha had also worked hard, sweating blood to get to where she was. He even considered Utaha to be his god. Megumi understood that Tomoya was a huge fan of Utaha. He couldn't wait for her next book, and this time he hoped there would be an anime adaptation. Megumi was also curious about the plot, wondering if it would have a love story similar to Koisaru Metronome. Tomoya said he would ask Utaha about it, but Megumi doubted Utaha would reveal something so important, since talking about it might be considered unprofessional. Tomoya fell silent upon hearing Megumi's words. Megumi then asked why Tomoya's reaction seemed like it triggered some past trauma. Tomoya assured her that he hadn't been hurt in any way and asked Megumi not to misunderstand. Megumi didn't want to go any further into the topic. Tomoya said that today would be the day he could ask Utaha everything he wanted. Today, Tomoya was about to interview Utaha, but Utaha asked him what all this was about. It turned out that a week ago, Tomoya had received an email from Utaha's assistant editor offering a job. Sonoko explained that since Utaha was shy around strangers, reluctant to work with others, and quick to get emotional, a typical news writer wouldn't be able to interview her. That's why Sonoko thought Utaha might be more willing to do it with someone she knew. Utaha said she just wanted to go home and sleep. Tomoya immediately stopped her, begging her to agree to the interview. Utaha repeated that she was shy, hard to work with, and easily irritated. Tomoya agreed with her and let her start walking away. But then he quickly apologized, admitting that he had mixed politeness with his personal opinions. Tomoya had guessed Utaha wouldn't want to do it, but when he found out it was an opportunity to learn more about Utaha's new book before anyone else, he couldn't turn it down. Sonoko suggested that Utaha just accept it, pointing out that it was just a small request from a writer who had already sold 500,000 copies of her book. Utaha was shocked that Sonoko, as a grown woman, would tarnish the workplace by bringing an amateur into it like that. Eventually, Utaha agreed to do the interview with Tomoya. He began the interview, which would be featured in Undead magazine. Regarding her new book series, Tomoya asked if this new series would be similar to Koisaru Metronome, which was set in Wago City. Utaha confirmed that she had intentionally made it similar. Tomoya then asked if that meant the new book was connected to the previous one in some way, like if it would take place at the same school or feature the same characters. Utaha started to feel sleepy and only answered with one word, possibly. Tomoya reminded her not to fall asleep after just 30 seconds of the interview. Utaha couldn't hold back her sleepiness because she had stayed up late working on the plot for her new series. However, Sonoko pointed out that she was the one worried because Utaha hadn't made any progress despite staying up all night and hadn't even written a single draft. Utaha then fell into a deep sleep. The table was now covered with various energy drinks to keep Utaha from falling asleep again. Tomoya continued with his questions. He mentioned that the continuation of Utaha's book Koisaru Metronome was highly anticipated, but it seemed like Utaha was under pressure because of the high expectations. Utaha simply said one word, no. Tomoya clarified, asking if she meant that no matter how much her life changed, it wouldn't affect her work, and she would continue to give her best. Utaha said that honestly, she wasn't sure her new series would sell as well as her previous one, purely because of her own abilities. Tomoya asked if it was because of the support from her readers that made Koizuru Metronome a hit and hoped that everyone would like her new series. Utaha remained indifferent in her response. Tomoya then praised Utaha for her outstanding involvement, saying it was the key to her success. However, Utaha responded that it was because of Tomoya that Koizuru Metronome sold so well. Tomoya insisted that his actions didn't have much of an impact. Sonoko, however, pointed out that Utaha's statement was half true because there had been a significant boost in sales after the book was featured on Tomoya's site. They had originally planned to summarize the book in volumes 2 or 3, and it had never even been posted, let alone reprinted. Honestly, the book wouldn't have appeared at all if it weren't for the hardcore fans of Fantastic Bunko. Tomoya quickly asked them not to reveal such details, adding that the publisher was at fault for not doing their job properly. Utaha agreed, especially since Fushikoa Shoten was indifferent to newcomers. Sonoko confirmed this, saying their sales department was completely unenthusiastic. Tomoya was feeling confused about what he would write for the interview results. He was also getting exhausted from conducting it and suggested speeding things up.